Stuart Bell. I'm GroupBC Sales and Marketing Director, and I'll be kicking off this morning's webinar just with a brief recap from our first webinar that gave an introduction to better information management, starting the journey toward level 2 BIM compliance. I'll then be handing over in about 10 minutes time to GroupBC's Chief Technology Officer, Stephen Crompton, who will proceed with the presentation. So just by way of introduction, for the past 20 years, GroupBC have been supporting the industry move from a sense of unmanaged digital chaos into a place of trusted project and asset information control, providing a platform that allows the capture, communication, computation of information across the supply chain, and importantly, across the complete asset life cycle. We work with we work across a variety of different sectors, and I guess it's that capability that's given us a unique perspective on the broader needs of the industry, having worked with both asset owning clients, but also with the construction supply chain, all the way down to single trade subcontractors. We'll be drawing upon some of our client experiences in this morning's webinar, and giving you direct insight to how they have managed some of the challenges that project information management and control demands, certainly as we've extended on our journey toward BIM level 2. So just by way of a brief recap, we talked in the last webinar about standing at the start line in April 2016 with the government's mandate on BIM level 2, and the thought that we were moving toward a promised land. And subsequently, lots of surveys each year have looked at the adoption and uptake, and there are very much some promising signs. So the MBS 2017 survey showing that 60% now use BIM, and 95% expect to use BIM process and solutions within the next 3 years. But we also recognise that there is a vast polarisation in usage as well. So in that same report, only 45% of project teams say that they actually use a model from inception to completion of a project, and only 26% pass on a model for building management. And what's interesting, moving to a second survey, which is a joint survey with the CIOB and BIM Plus, is it focused on about 400 respondents, and looking at adoption levels in central and local governments. I guess the contrast is 62% of central government departments aren't using or mandating level 2 BIM currently, and 83% of publicly funded clients aren't as well. And in the private sector, that's probably a little bit more stark, in that 89% aren't demanding level 2 BIM. But we'll introduce a little bit later in the talk an alternate position on level 2 itself. It's quite an interesting report. Just at the bottom there, these slides will be available and distributed to you afterwards. I'd encourage you to look at both of those surveys and look at some of the insights revealed there. So what do we typically see today? Well, we see a construction industry, and all the way from originating asset owner who are looking to procure built assets and projects through the construction supply chain. Everybody using a variety of different devices, a world dominated by email, a world dominated by mobility as well, where there is a constant demand for task completion, be that via email or portal or messages. Those emails being the conduit to many organisations and carrying lots of large attachments, and those attachments being filed onto local network shares or corporate network drives as well. And we've often heard the anarchy and chaos of network shares then ensues, and the never the top shall the originator find the latest as-built drawing along the myriad of different network shares that sit there. We've also adopted quite a lot of technology over the past 30 or 40 years, and each of those technology have have their own proprietary gatekeepers in certain circumstances, and it's quite challenging to get the information that you need in support of your job. And we see, as a result of that, applications like Excel used as a middle ground for reporting, introducing a latency and disconnecting information maybe from corporate systems. So that might be a latest register of RFIs, or it might be the latest commercial view of a project. And in more recent times, we've seen the advent of probably more uncontrolled file sharing platforms. That people just need to get the job done. So email won't now act as the messenger service for me for these files that are larger than 10 meg. So I'm going to revert out to my own personal Dropbox account to transmit that, and probably breaking every compliance and procedural rule in our own business, let alone any contractual clauses you may have with your sensitive client as to where that data is being shared. So information management begins at home, and I've turned to a consultancy that many of our clients and ourselves have worked alongside, PCSG. Creation of information in a managed team environment works with file templates, enable control of the file naming, major and minor versions, and suitability codes. And so it's important that we know, just to make sense of the vast amounts of information and communication that's taking place on projects up and down the chain, across design teams, across subcontract trades to main contractor, onward to clients, that we have to introduce better levels of control. And what we've seen and what we've witnessed over the last 20 years of our involvement in the industry is with the introduction of level 2 BIM, it's like turning up the volume control on compliance, driving the need for specific protocol adherence to a new level. But that's not unique. Those sorts of things have been in existence for many years, but they still act as a challenge. And we also see, and one of these webinars isn't a presentation without revealing the wedge. We see many people still struggling to adopt and crawling to the start line, still working very much on a file-centric basis and sharing information over email, network shares, etc. But others are certainly taking the opportunity and looking at the advantages that not only level 2 BIM delivers to their organisation, but better information management generally across their projects, and the value and better outcome and outturn certainty they can deliver to their clients when delivering built assets as well. So that's recap of webinar 1. Just to introduce Stephen Crompton. So Stephen is GroupBC's CTO, and he'll take charge now for the remainder of the session.
So thank you everyone for attending today. As you can see here from the agenda, with a title such as Reality BIM, I felt it fitting initially to just almost look forward and say, what is the ideal, where we wish to get to, but then take it down to where we actually are, and where we actually are, of course, varies. That wedge is, as I remember being told by Mervyn Richards some time ago, it's a wedge because it's a gradual adoption. It isn't a step change, and so it is better to get on that journey and start now than think that you have to do absolutely everything from day one. I will support this with case studies, going back many years in some cases, but also coming to the current day, and then Stuart will finish with a close. In between, we'll dip into some software. Our customers have very kindly allowed us to show some things which they're very proud of, and we are too. And so without further ado, let's focus first and foremost on what I'm going to call ideal BIM. And a lot of us have heard this phrase. I think the current phrase is digital transformation, but before that, very much talking about this idea of digital twins. And I think twin is a really important word here, because this is not just about delivering information. The most important thing, of course, here is that that information is able to be updated throughout its life cycle in the same way that real twins get old and change. That happens with assets of any kind as well. We need to recognize that. We need a process and a culture and systems in place to be able to do this. This is a real project. If you're unfamiliar with Wienerberger, they're the world's largest supplier of bricks, tiles and blocks. And this is a very exciting initiative from them, which they've presented on a number of times, which is effectively about manufacturing-led supply chains delivering housing as a service. But if we look at it as the simplest, whereas historically we have the idea of presenting a user, a customer, the person who's going to be living in that house with a physical house and some keys to that house, we're now in a world where as we develop that physical house, in fact, in parallel to that, we have its virtual equivalent. We have its digital twin. And not only, of course, does this allow us to pre-configure and place into this model all the specific equipment that is already expected to go in there from a framework of supplier partners and so on. But from an end user perspective, I can go in, I can choose paint colors, and then of course when it gets into operations, we can get access to service information, manuals and so on. But really, I'm touching very much on where we go as far as level as Digital Built Britain, formerly Level 3, is concerned. This isn't just about delivering a project or even about operating an asset. It's about looking at what we set out to do, looking about what we actually achieve through sensors within the asset, and then having that feedback loop to make sure that as we continue, we grow and develop better assets. Now, it's not just also about that single asset, and this is something really close to our hearts. It's about being able to connect all the data around us, and I'm just going to play this video here, and I'll just explain what you're seeing here. So all of this, first and foremost, is going through a web browser. We're very proud to develop our own viewing technology, because this allows us to do innovation such as you're seeing here. And this is a point cloud which has been scanned by a drone flying over a particular area, a proposed development area. And as you can see there, we've also federated in some mapping information. Effectively, this was an exercise in validating mapping information, but also showing within that that we could bring that together with ultimately an estate of these digital assets. So there is that E4 home that you can see there, and just as you will have seen, I'm sure, in other things, you can click on the objects, you can see the information about them and so on. Now, this is quite a long video. We have a lot to get through, but hopefully that's just given you a real taster of capability. And we must remember, of course, that we very specifically talk here about building as a verb, if you will, rather than a noun. We're building information models. It's not just a building such as the one I'm sitting in now, having braved through the snow. We have customers within, for example, the linear asset sector. We ourselves are very proud to work directly with Highways England, but we also have JV customers delivering to linear assets in the rail sector, and also we have large contractors such as Balfour and Costain who've been doing that for a long time. So this is about anything that is effectively not natural environment that goes through a CapEx and then OpEx procedure. And as I've said, it's not just about delivering that information. Actually, it's about a connected world of bringing all that information together. And of course, and this really is a topic for today, this is not just about new builds. And what I really like about this example here is this is actually a model of our office, and just a humbling moment. This was put together by two 16-year-old students who came and worked for us for a week, and simply through the use of original sort of tools such as measuring tape and Google SketchUp, and then lastly the fit out information from the drawings that we had, we challenged them with creating an interactive digital model that they could then get access to the details of the rooms, and that's exactly what you see here. Now, interestingly enough, they themselves came to a conclusion that they didn't actually, to get the value of being able to have the maintenance information of these objects, the manuals and so on, they didn't need to go down to such a level of detail to actually explicitly tag every single object. That way, particularly in this retrofit world, these red cylinders you see here are effectively the room data sheet. They, if you go to any one of those and you go to the room and you scan that QR code at the top right, it then returns all of the information for the objects within that room. But frankly, our rooms are quite small, and that allows us to use that information for maintenance. So this ideal BIM, which we're all going through, to kind of break it down as far as the wedge is concerned, you know, it's three-dimensional, it's a twin, it's got to be absolutely accessible throughout the entire lifetime of the asset, and fundamentally this is by everyone. Everyone will say people, process, technology. You know, people is so important. This is a collaborative process of building and maintaining information. Therefore, it has to be able to be consumed by anyone from anywhere. That, of course, means mobility, and we'll touch on that. But clearly, as we all know, in this world of claims and so on, it's fundamental that the information has a full governance and audit trail around all the interactions within it. We all use lots and lots of different software. And again, in this ideal world, we would have compatibility throughout, seamless flow of data and so on, continuing throughout the life with the different software, and as that all gets updated and so on. And just to hammer home, clearly one of the most important facets of this is that as we continue to update the real physical asset, then the virtual asset itself gets updated too. And that this is, and I think something, you know, most recently looking at something like a Grenfell, where, you know, the next question after such a tragedy was, where else might we have problems? You know, this is not about one project. This is not delivering something singular well. This is about a portfolio view of getting a digital view of our estate that we can then better use to make the right information about our assets. And of course, these assets sit, they're geolocated, they have a real place if we start with the end in mind, and we need to be able to factor that in as well. And if we remember why this is all about, you know, here it is here from Digital Built Britain, you know, looking at it from a point of view of economic benefit, really the big picture is not in the calculus or even the operations phase. It's how we are going to grow this connected world to better support us as we grow within our urban environments and so on, by being able to optimize our connected services and systems, all of which is brilliant. But I'm fairly sure a lot of you would recognize that this is the world that we sit in at the moment, and this is certainly our experience that we're presenting here. Everyone, certainly from a client perspective, wants this view of that's just been presented there, but we find 95% or more is simply not there. There's an existing estate, and typically that's CAD drawings. It can be paper, but if it's CAD drawings, they sit on network shares. There's information within a CAFM system and so on. And LiDAR is wonderful technology. You saw the scan before, and as a surveying tool and as getting an example of the existing, it's fantastic, but it will not change it from an information perspective. Being able to get information through object recognition will absolutely help, especially if we can tag that to our systems, but that is some way to go. And also, frankly, as anyone delivering information is I'm sure aware, the demand is very, very variable. It's certainly true that because of the mandate, the public is greater than the private sector, but it still is absolutely not the case that this is business as usual. We must remember this is not a mandate just on the supply chain. This is a mandate, it is a procurement mandate that all capital projects of a certain amount must be procured in this way, and that gets trickled down. Now, clearly, there's been some work to do, but you also have to ask the question, how much of this is around awareness and really understanding this, or in fact around recognizing the value in doing this in the first place. And that's a challenge for all of us, including ourselves, to get the value of better information across. And we've been championing that for the last 20 years. But there's also even if you do buy into what a fantastic journey it would be, there's a real problem around how you actually define what information you want, how you understand the information that's going to be needed to operate your asset, not least if we're in this world of outsourcing that to someone else who's going to make those decisions for us. How do we make sure when we haven't yet contracted them that we get the right information for them? There's a phrase which we've heard used recently, which is by all means outsource the service, but insource the data. And we're seeing more and more that our customers are wanting to make sure that whoever is providing service, there is a flow to get the information about the updating asset coming back. But of course, we've got a brief, we've got information being delivered, and that is supposed to match the brief. So we know we've got the building we wanted that delivers against a performance spec. But there's of course the issue of how we check that. So there's absolutely some way to go, but we've made some great progress. And software I mentioned, and it is incompatible, especially around specialist tools. I'm a huge champion, as everyone within BC is, around open data, but where we stand, there's clearly some challenges around that, and therefore being able to link to that is also important. And GIS at the moment, this idea of start with end in mind starts with where this is. It's typically a specialist discipline. It's seen as it's the other part of the business. It's like if you wanted to Google something, having to ring up the one person who had the computer, get the answer from them, and then produce a report. It doesn't make sense. We're all part of the same journey, and we've done some work there, as you'll see. And finally, the what I call the elephant in the room, which is what I said at the start, which is how do you actually maintain that information? If you get fantastic information delivered, but then you don't have the tools and capability to ensure that all that value doesn't slowly erode, then we won't end up where we want to be. So we've been doing this for a while, as you can see there. I'm flicking through for reasons of time, you will, I'm sure, know the name Stratford City, part of the Olympic Park development. We were very, very proud to secure the contract for providing the CDE for that. And as you can see from the top left, we delivered that as a level 1 BIM project, one of the first in the country. In fact, when we delivered it, no one knew of 1192-2007. It began with the Vanti, which of course expanded to that. And we went through a lot of cultural and challenges there, but everyone saw the benefit of that, not least the client. Something as simple as being able to properly structure information so that it related to the location within the asset in terms of its zone and level and so on. The broken up project structure, which actually reflects the asset structure. It then meant that you could go into a single room, within the delivered asset, and you had that digital asset record spatially broken down, albeit from a file basis. And we'll touch on that. But stepping forward into the future, and one of our customers for a long, long time, since 2005, Thames Water, they have been on this journey of better information for a long time. And it's just a moment to look at the BIM fundamentals, to remember that this is all about how, moving forward, can we make better decisions from information which is current and trusted. Now, if you look at those current and trusted, it draws out two things. First and foremost, for information to be current, it needs to be able to be kept up to date. So clearly, being able to maintain information is fundamental, and it also must be able to be audited. So you've got to know when was it updated, because if it was updated 4 years ago, then almost certainly you'll go out and carry out a new survey. But that, of course, depends on what the time sensitivity of the information is, the currency, if you will. And we, of course, must know the provenance in order to know its trust. It needs to be updated by an appropriate individual and not someone, well, through security, who we would expect not to have access to be able to do that anyway. But of course, it very much depends how people choose to configure and make these systems. But adoption is a really key thing here. People, process, technology, people are at the heart of it. If it isn't something which is going to be adopted because it's simple, and not just simple from a point of view of it looks clean and easy, and this is the Thames system you can see here, but it's also relevant. So this isn't some system which is identical for every single customer. What Thames have done is recognize that to get the level of adoption that they have, this is about making it so that it delivers on the specific needs of that organization. But as you go in there, whatever your role is, the new starter coming on board, getting access to training videos, being able to go into sharing spaces to have access to resources and so on, it's all there for you, including access to projects. being able to get to that information at any time from these simple tweaks here to be able to get to those tiles. And of course, I mentioned Geo, and one of the most simple ways, of course, in which to navigate a system, never mind folder structures and so on. If I know I'm going to be working on a particular asset in a particular location, then if I can simply see a view of all of my assets, I can zoom down into that, and I can then click and get immediate access to my project, and I can do that whether I'm desktop or whether I'm mobile. It's just a much more natural, intuitive experience for me. But it's also the case that we can go one step better there and bring in other associated data as well. But that's for another day. And I mentioned these common rooms, which are so this is not. This is not level 2 project information. This is treating the framework delivery partner, if you will, as a company in its own right. And this is the hub for all the information, organizational information, the strategy, the policies, and so on, which is going to allow people to be onboarded and get access and make the right decisions throughout this 5-year program of delivery, and then of course subsequently the next one. So it's hugely important to recognize that this is just as much about organizational information management as it is about simply delivering a digital asset. And communication is absolutely key. I always sum up this process of delivering this asset as communicate, capture, compute, and then connect. And communication here, what you're seeing here is the equivalent of what once was a manual, 200 pages with points in there saying, and now you need to deliver this, and lots of to and fro of arguing exactly what that means and so on and so forth. Instead, you can see a flow of the stages of project delivery. You can see the broken down deliverables within there, who's responsible for them, whether they've been delivered. There's a green tick there saying that or not. And then all that information, when delivered, sits within one of the project spaces here with appropriate approval workflows and so on. And you can see here that actually this information here is not tagged with its 1192 naming convention status, those of you who know that, but that doesn't stop it being hugely useful when it has things like this has been authorized to be used for this purpose. Now, I'm just going to very, very briefly, because I know we've got a lot to do, go into this this Thames space. And if I go into Thames, we log in, and I just want to show you, yes, I thought I had logged out, so copy that, and log in. So here's the system that you saw. Here is my project view of the world. I only have access to the projects that I've been given access to. And you'll notice in particular here a project. In fact, I'm in what's called a project hub. We recognize that people have different views of the world depending on whether they're interested in assets, whether they're interested in programs, whether they're interested in projects. They want to quickly be able to get to information, no matter whether or not it's buried in a deep hierarchy as far as being able to manage that information from an administration point of view. We recognize the need to flatten that out, to take people very, very quickly to the information to allow them to do their job. And we focused for the last couple of years in particular. This is, of course, a training project, and we're delivering a tractor there. But this overview here shows us exactly what I was showing, but immediately at that project level, and all that red is things that have to be done yet. Now, if I click into the project and look here at the plan there, then hopefully this is coming through. We can see what I described, which is this staged delivery of information through to making sure we have ultimately the employer's asset information being delivered, but right down to the start. And this is templated across every single project. There are 500 projects across programs going at any given time within Thames, and the savings have been calculated to an equivalent of saving 12 million a year. So, this information management can really deliver practically. But if we look here on setting up the scheme, then we can see that there's information to be provided. So 1 out of 2 required deliverables has been provided there. So if I just, I don't have to drill into a folder, I don't have to know what I'm doing, I can just see that that step has to be dealt with. I click on setting up the scheme, and it takes me into a step. And I can see there, okay, so there's a setup form as far as the common data environment is concerned. Actually, for expediency, I'm going to use that as my example. But this isn't just about telling people what to do. This is about giving them all the help to get that right first time. So there's the procedures, there's the work instructions, all specific to the information itself. And even better than that, I can then choose to create that information from a template, and that really spoon feeds me and takes me through the entire process. And if we then go back for reasons of time into the project and we drill down, that information delivered thus finally ends up within this general collection of information where it goes through those respective workflows, although of course some of that workflow will have happened through that process. So that's how Thames are using it. I now want to talk about Sainsbury's because this is a really interesting case study, and very, very briefly, I'm going to click on this video here, and hopefully you'll be able to hear the audio. So I think what's fundamentally important about that is recognizing that from a client perspective, our engagement with Sainsbury's did not start around, we want BIM. It started around them having real questions to understand what they have, as simple as how much space, which stores have got particular equipment, and so on and so forth. And as I said at the start, what's really interesting about that is their current existing situation as we started on this journey was that information was available, but was available on a network share in drawings, available only to a relatively small handful of people. So it was recognized that they needed to embrace the spirit of a common data environment. But if we look, in fact, start on the right-hand side, this is this cultural challenge. How do you make sure that when you go into a room and you're looking for something, it doesn't look like this? Well, fundamentally, first and foremost, you start with a blank canvas and then you create placeholders for everything. You create structures and asset hierarchy, as we would say, so that we then end up with what's on the left-hand side, with everything having a defined place. And that is a wonderful analogy for this naming convention, which is quite divisive, I found, but actually when really used well can deliver enormous benefits, as we'll see with Sainsbury's. Now, they have not delivered it to the letter. They have based their naming convention in particular around the fact they're not just delivering single investments, but they're delivering multiple investments as part of programs across a huge estate of different assets. So actually all of that information is reflected there, but the very fact that they've got that spatial coordination of information leads then to being able to adopt in a very controlled way the delivery processes of level 2, which, as you can see, mirrored there within their own system. Now I'm going to demo. I'm very proud to be able to demo the Sainsbury's system. And if I just log on here, and I'm going to go in And you can see here as well, the eagle-eyed among you, that we have the ability to log in also via a corporate account. So this is the interface that every end user in Sainsbury's is presented with. And as I said before, we're not in this world where we are simply looking at the delivery of projects or investments, as Sainsbury's call them. We're actually in the world of assets. We're in the world of programs, we're in the world of locations, and I think uniquely within our system, we have the ability to reflect that. So if I, for example, click on assets, then we can see here an asset hub, and we can see here one particular asset in there, which is the Lords Hill supermarket. And if I go into that Lords Hill supermarket, I can then see that there is a link here quickly to get to the asset store plan, and that will take me, if I click on it, through to the current information in all its many forms. And as you can see, its suitability, it can be used for a construction record because it's been accepted. But actually, I knew that was the case already, because if we look at the asset investments here and we go into the Sainsbury's Argos store, in fact, the Lords Hill Argos store is part of an overall investment program. And if I go into the program link here itself, then you can see here that I have something representing the whole program. And what we're able to do is we can click, because of the fact they're using all this hugely structured information, we can find all of the currently approved information that's gone through from a project record, not across one store, but across hundreds of stores, delivering that information through the entire process. What I do want to get to is focusing around actual level 2 BIM standards. If we just then look at this CapEx, this procurement of data, starting with an end in mind, starting with the assets, starting with detailing the information requirements, pushing those down so that then the BIM execution plan, which is about how the supplier is going to be able to deliver not just the asset, but the digital asset as well, and then propagating that, of course, through the supply chain to their individual parts. Now, what's in a name? I know I go on about the naming convention, but absolutely, it's hugely important, not just for the reasons that we've seen, but from a software perspective. If this is used, and we first did this with Westfield, we can actually save vast amounts of time. Hundreds of documents, thousands potentially, can be imported into a system, and because they've been tagged correctly within the name, they can be automatically tagged with attribution information in the form of metadata, thus saving vast amounts of time. Now, as far as the delivery role of the CDE is concerned, as I said before, it's about communicating out a need, and that might be through the method we saw with Thames, or it might be creating expectations of delivery of information, as you can see here, capturing that, whether you're in the desktop or whether you're in that mobile space, and then being able to use that information to compute. And importantly, we say information management begins at home. This is not one system. We have clients that we provide asset information management systems for, and we have clients we provide, customers we provide project information management systems for. And actually, it's that connected flow of information that matters. And it's vital that each organization has their own record of activity around claims and so on. So if I now go into a very, very brief demo of that, again, we can see, if I go into initial construction project and I log in as myself, I'm logging here into a construction project. I can see here that actually that sits in the UK, in Doncaster, a lovely place. It's actually a construction project for the Acme shopping centre. If we go into the Acme shopping centre, we can see here's the asset information about that. It's snowing in Yorkshire at the moment, unsurprisingly. We go back into the project, then we can see here something which will be familiar to many, which is the notion of the 1192 whip through to shared through to publish and so on. Actually, all of the project documentation is managed here in a very structured way. In fact, we go into project documentation, and we look at what we have here, then we have a combination of information that is waiting to be delivered. This is these placeholders for information. We also have versionable information, in this case, the updated drawings of the ground floor that's come here from the architects, that's been tagged appropriately with the right revision information, with the appropriate volume, system level, location, and so on, all of which, as I say, anything which is in with the name can be pulled through. And we have some model information which importantly has gone through a process and has been issued throughout for coordination. And if I just focus on that for a second and go into the initial construction project, so we have this whole flow of information, but we know if we click on the shared information, that must be information that's gone through a workflow and has been accepted as being suitable for a given purpose. So if I then were to click on here and go actions and view, then this will, as we saw earlier, this is our own viewer, as we said. It's been designed with simplicity in mind. It's been designed with being able to be delivered to anyone within the supply chain and to be able to pick up and play it. My brief to the designers of this was, I want my my mum to be able to use this, and she is over 80. And I have put it in front of her, and she can. So you know, that is a success. If we just zoom in here and we for example double click on a window, then of course we can see all of the extra information there. But if I say I want to find similar objects and I'm wanting to find all of the windows, that's it on level 2. Then we can do find and select, and we can find that. And then fantastically, of course, because what we need to do is we need to build up the digital asset, I can then associate that documentation and I can find existing information within there. And in fact, if I go into the initial construction project, which I'm in, I go into my shared documentation, and in true Blue Peter fashion, actually, I've got a PDF, which is the instruction for those Velux windows that you saw there. I can click associate, and in one fell swoop, I have managed, if we click on just one of these, to associate that documentation that belongs to that particular asset with the digital asset, all in one simple, smooth workflow. So there's a lot more that we could progress there, but I want to finally talk about a really exciting customer, which is Mackley. Most of you won't know of them, but they are a specialist contractor focusing in flood defence, coastal maintenance. They've been around a long time, and they are the perfect example of people who have not just embraced BIM, but embraced this at an organisational level as well as delivering within those sectors. They've been principal contractor in their local area on the I-360 in Brighton, but mostly focusing around flood defences. Now, as you can see there, these are their slides, which they kindly let me use this. They use their accommodator environment for managing all their organisational information, ensuring standards, use of forms and templates and so on throughout, as well as in tenders and so on. And they've recognised the value of linking information physically from the outside world to the CDE, whether that's on bits of paper or from being able to link from Google Earth. But in fact, on the subject of Google Earth, they took this as a challenge to us, and they said, well, we want to be able to have the benefits that we get from Google Earth, but we don't want people to install Google Earth. We want to be able to instead do this through your system. And the final, very brief demo I'm going to pick up is going to be exactly that. So if I log now onto the KML system, in fact, if I just simply log in here, then you can see here I'm in a project, Mackley Shoreham. I have my project documents in here. But if we then go to a map, you'll notice something rather special about this. And what's rather special about this is we have their projects laid out on here, but we also have captured information. Some of you who know KML will know this comes from Google Earth. And if I expand this area of interest here, and I click, for example, on Norfolk House, then not only does it signpost to me a polygon, but it also tells me all of the information about that. And if I had access to the Mackley system, this link here would not necessarily just take me to a drawing, but where you saw within my level 2 environment, that would actually take me to a search that returns all the currently up-to-date workflow information that's gone through that 1192 process. So if I'm out on site and I I want to get access to all the current information for doing my job. I don't want to be on a mobile phone where I have to browse through some small structure of folders and so on. I just want to be able to go to my location, click on a queue, click on a link, and get my documentation. And that's absolutely what we can deliver, and that's absolutely what I see as real use of information management driving benefits. So I'm now going to go over to Stuart, who's going to wrap up and hopefully we take some questions.
Thank you, Steve. So just by way of wrap up, we've all over the past couple of years been suffering somewhat from BIM fatigue. So you'll be heartened to know in 2018 that it's all about digital transformation, and it's a journey that many of us have been on for a period of time. And I think Steve referenced a couple of times in today's presentation that whilst there is some fabulous technology available to support the industry, the Achilles heel historically for adoption and true success of information management systems driving positive change really are our people, and it's the importance of continued education and knowledge sharing, not only within our own internal organizations, but working closely with our clients and supply chain partners as well. And for I mentioned at the beginning that for 20 years now, GroupBC have been a close partner to many leading asset owning clients, principal tier one contractors, designers, consultants, all the way through to regional contractor and trade contractor organizations as well. And the importance of having a portal environment that doesn't only just deliver basic file share and collaboration needs, but extends to organizational improvements and organizational information management has been recognized as important as well. And we deliver that through our solution, BC Enterprise, and Steve, through the presentation, showed a number of areas there. So right through the core is an environment that manages data documentation and spatial information, in fact, geospatial information as well. And that environment, I think what's key for all of us is that having captured information, we want to be able to analyze, interrogate, and report on that information in a live environment. And if it's sat across a myriad of network shares and individual isolated laptops and hard drives and disparate Dropbox accounts, that's particularly challenging for a business to do. So being able to collapse and consolidate that information into a single place allows us to do that. And then by introducing a workflow engine, it allows us to see together process within our own internal organization, but also across the decision chain around, for instance, approval across our integrated supply chains as well. I think Steve mentioned in the presentation that we recognise we're part of an ecosystem. There isn't one piece of technology that will deliver everything. So don't believe the hype. We recognise that we're an important part of a broader ecosystem, and having an interface to allow third-party vendors and solutions and our clients with their own in-house technical teams as well to interrogate information that we hold has proven to be particularly valuable, and certainly in the presentations that Steve showed around Thames and Sainsbury's, that's really quite evident there. And it's also been important for us to think about those real basic things about how do people get information in and out of the common data environment, out of the BC platform. And that's something that we're continually challenged by our construction supply chain partners pushing up to clients, and by clients wanting better control and participation and receipt of compliant information from their supply chain. So we've got some really exciting things that, if you stay tuned through the course of this year, we'll be revealing to market about how we're able to connect environments together. It's those APIs again being important to be able to push into other third-party systems as well. And we've touched on just a small part of capability, and in doing so, what we've hoped to do in today's webinar is to start to answer some of the questions of how you can drive compliance in basic information management standards and protocols all the way up to level 2 compliance on those projects and those clients that are mandating. But for us, it's all about helping clients achieve stronger and better business outcomes. So, thinking about Sainsbury's and their vast store portfolio, answering those plain language questions about what stores do we have certain pizza ovens in, being able to interrogate a database to harvest and find and locate that information in context and ensure it's the latest information has been really important. And most recently, as Steve showed with Mackley, as a communication tool to the Environment Agency, Mackley have been able to leverage and utilise Google Earth and link that through to the BC platform and all of the resident information to give a much stronger metaphor for searching to find information through something that's very intuitive, a highly visual map, and then being able to link through to that underlying data. Getting from A to B, and how do you eat the elephant? How do you get started on this journey? How do you start the project? Well, it's about having, as with any project, a very clear brief and a very clear and structured set of desired outcomes for your project, a set of resources that are champions and advocates of an approach and want to drive toward better business benefit and leverage the opportunity. And just at the bottom there, that by having a defined structure for implementation, we're really able to help our clients deliver out quite quickly. And it also helps that at a delivery level, we've got people that in our business that have many years experience, are industry professionals and talk the language of industry. They will interface directly with clients, sometimes with client advisors as well, where perhaps a contractor has bought in BIM as a work package, and they've bought in a consultant, but they still want to own their own audit trail and have their own CDE and information management environment established. Again, we're very good at conversing and working in that type of environment as well. And as you'd expect with any of your own delivered projects, the methodology for delivering a CDE, whether that is to a specific project or program that's looking to attain level 2 compliance, or whether it's to an organization just looking to at last make headway with the anarchy and chaos of network shares, this methodology really helps us work with clients to take very positive and progressive steps towards a managed world of digital information. We're just heading for a wrap up. We've got a couple of minutes, but just before we move on to final Q&A, if at the end of this session you'll be emailed, and we really would welcome your feedback. So a little survey will pop up, and if there's anything additional, you'll see some contact information. Really welcome your feedback. We every year for the past 20 years, we've challenged ourselves with trying to reinvigorate and think about suitable content to help both enlighten, educate, and hopefully infuse some advocacy towards better information management. And if we haven't hit the button, or you're expecting something different, or you particularly liked an approach we made, please do let us know. If you'd like to learn a little bit more, perhaps one-on-one, and get into a bit of a dialogue, please either request an online demonstration, or our preference is an on-site workshop. We really are quite an agreeable bunch. But if you keep track of our events page, this webinar is the second in a series of 8, where we're taking a journey across the industry through different sectors that we operate, and giving a slightly different perspective on how we're able to support those industries. So I will, in the role of maitre d' for this morning's webinar, I'm just flicking towards my questions panel here. There's a couple of questions that have come in. Now I'm going to pick the technical ones only because Steve carries that role as CTO, and I'll find them more challenging to answer myself. So we've probably got time for 2 or 3, Steve. So first one, will open standards in BIM win out? Question mark.
I hope so. I think the most important thing here is we would not be sitting here today, and I would not have been able to give that presentation and show that software without open standards that have transformed other industries, most notably the tech industry. It's just a question of everyone getting behind and recognizing that as an enabling force, open standards are going to be the only way to bring the efficiencies that we need. Now, it is going to be a journey. It is going to take time. It is going to mean that other software, has to sort of catch up and so on. I would say in the intermediate time, the most important thing in the absence of open standards is that all the information we have is readable, that we can have conversations with each other. If information is proprietary and locked away, then it is working against the spirit of collaboration. And how can we hope to do information management? So, my worst case is I can simply read every information, and there is software out there to help us look at that. The best case is that everyone is talking the same language and using those standards. And I think to achieve Digital Built Britain, ultimately, we're going to have to.
Fantastic, thank you. I think there's a question here. Maybe the sentiments were out of that second survey that I showed, where 90% of private sector projects probably aren't faced with the challenges and opportunities of level 2 BIM. So the question here, how does the system support naming conventions outside of BIM level 2?
Very well, is the answer. We are an enormously flexible platform. It's what's given us the success we have. Nothing is predefined. We can, of course, provide templated ways of working, but ultimately we have projects now with customers who, even on the same project, run different naming conventions. They have more informal naming conventions for their own non-contractual communication, and then they follow the client's naming convention as far as their deliverable. But even among our clients, if we not just look at Sainsbury's, but look at some of those who are delivering to government level 2 standard, there is still variation within there. And in fact, if we look at the standards, we see optional variations coming in through the whole nature of the PAS being that these things get tested, they get fed back, and they deliver changes. So we can support those variations across the board.